माधवा कुंज विहारी गोपी जनवल्लभा गिरिवरधारी गोपी जनवल्लभा गिरिवरधारी यशोदनन्दना व्रजजनरञ्जना यशोदानन्दना व्रजजनरञ्जना यशोदानन्दना व्रजजनरञ्जना यमुनातिरावनचारी यमुनातिरावनचारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज विहारी गोपी जनवल्लभा गिरिवरधारी यशोदनन्दना व्रजजनरञ्जना यमुनातिरावनचारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज विहारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज विहारी ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवतीरुत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकीनन्दनाय च नन्दगोपकुमाराय गोविन्दाय नमो नमः। हरे कृष्ण. So today we are reading from the second canto, 6th chapter, titled Purusha Sukta Confirmed. We'll be covering verses from 12th to 16th. So we will be reciting verse number 12. Dharmasya mama tubhyam cha kumaranam bhavasya cha विज्ञानस्य च सत्त्वस्य परस्यात्मा परायणम्। Dharmasya mama tubhyam cha kumaranam bhavasya cha Vijnanasya cha satvasya parasyatma parayanam. Dharmasya mama tubhyam cha kumaranam bhavasya cha Vijnanasya cha satvasya parasyatma parayanam. Parasyatma parayanam. Dharmasya mama tubhyam cha kumaranam bhavasya cha Vijnanasya cha satvasya parasyatma parayanam. Dharmasya mama tubhyam cha kumaranam bhavasya cha Vijnanasya cha satvasya parasyatma parayanam. Matajis. Dharmasya mama tubhyam cha kumaranam bhavasya cha Vijnanasya cha satvasya parasyatma parayanam. What word meanings? Dharmasya, of religious principles or of Yamaraj. Mama, mine. Tubhyam, of yours. Cha, and. Kumaranam, of the four Kumaras. Bhavasya, Lord Shiva. Cha, and also. Vijnanasya, of transcendental knowledge. Cha, also. Satvasya, of truth. Parasya, of the great personality. Atma, consciousness. Parayanam, dependent. Translation. Also, the consciousness of that great personality is the abode of religious principles, mine, yours, and those of the four bachelors Sanaka, Sanatan, Sanat Kumar, and Sanandan. The consciousness is also the abode of truth and transcendental knowledge. So there is no purport. So we will be reading verses 13 to 16, and then there is a purport for those verses. So I will read, you don't have to repeat. Aham bhavan bhavaschaiva tayi me munayograjaha surasuranaranaagaha kaga mriga sarisripaha gandharvapsaraso yaksha raksho bhutagano ragaha pashavappitaras siddha vidyadarascharanaadruma अन्ये च विविधा जीवा जलस्थलनभौकसः गृहऋक्षकेतवस्तारास्तडितस्तनयित्नवः सर्वं पुरुषमेवेदं भूतं भव्यं भवच्च यत् तेनेदमावृतं विश्वं वितस्तिम् अधितिष्ठति. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation. Beginning from me, Brahma, down to you and Bhava or Shiva, all the great sages who were born before you, the demigods, the demons, the nagas, the human beings, the birds, the bees, as well as the reptiles, etc., and all phenomenal manifestations of the universe, namely the planets, stars, asteroids, luminaries, lightning, thunder, and the inhabitants of the different planetary systems, namely the Gandharvas, the Apsaras, Yakshas, Rakshasas, Bhutaganas, Uragas, Pashus, Pitas, Siddhas, Vidyadharas, Charanas, and all other different varieties of living entities, including the birds, bees, trees, and everything that be are all covered by the universal form of the Lord at all times, namely past, present, and future, although he is transcendental to all of them, eternally existing in a form not exceeding 9 inches. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, by his partial expansion measuring not more than 9 inches as Supersoul, expands by his potential energy in the shape of the universal form, which includes everything manifested in different varieties of organic and inorganic materials. The manifested varieties of the universe are therefore not different from the Lord, just as golden ornaments of different shapes and forms are non-different from the original stock reserve of gold. In other words, the Lord is the supreme person who controls everything within the creation, and still he remains the supreme separate identity, distinct from all manifested material creation. In the Bhagavad Gita, he is therefore said to be Yogeshwara. Everything rests on the potency of Lord Sri Krishna, and still the Lord is different from and transcendental to all such identities. In the Vedic Purusha Sukta of the Rig mantra, this is also confirmed. This philosophical truth of simultaneous oneness and difference was propounded by Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and it is known as Achintya Bheda Abheda Tattva. Brahma, Narada, and all others are simultaneously one with the Lord and different from the Supreme Lord. We are all one with him, just as the gold ornaments are one in quality with the stock gold. But the individual gold ornament is never equal in quantity with the stock gold. The stock gold is never exhausted, even if there are innumerable ornaments emanating from the stock, because the stock is Purnam. Of course, this is spiritual stock. In the material world, if you keep removing, it will become over. Even if Purnam is deducted from the Purnam, still the supreme Purnam remains the same Purnam. This fact is inconceivable to our present imperfect senses. Lord Chaitanya therefore defined his theory of philosophy as achintya and or inconceivable, and as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita as well as in the Bhagavatam, Lord Chaitanya's theory of achintya bheda bheda tattva is the perfect philosophy of the absolute truth. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupak Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guroho Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Deenabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So, the current conversation that is happening is between Brahmaji and Narada Muni. So Narada Muni had approached Brahma and he asked these 6 questions. Yadrupam, yadadishtanam, yatasrishtam idam prabho, Yat samstam, yat param, yatcha, tat tattvam vada tatvatah. He has these 6 questions. Yad rupam. What are the characteristics of this universe? Yad adishtanam. What is the shelter of this universe? Yatas srishtam. How this universe is created. Yat samstam. And into which does it merge at the time of dissolution? Yat param. And who is the supreme person on whom everything else is dependent and everyone else is dependent upon? Yatcha. And what are the material constituents? What are the constituents of this universe? So, in the 5th chapter, the first 3 questions were already answered by Brahmaji. Yad Rupam, what is the form of this universe? He says, Dravyam karmacha kalascha swabhavo jiva evacha Vasudevat paro brahman nacha anya arthosti tatvatah. My dear Narada, whatever you see in this world is constituted of these 5 things. Dravya, karma, kala, swabhava and jiva. Vasudevat paro brahman nacha anya arthosti tatvatah. And because all these are energies of the Supreme Lord Vasudev, you should understand that there is nothing else that exists other than Vasudev. Okay, Yadrupam. So the form of the universe is basically the energy of the Supreme Lord in the form of Dravyam, Karma, Kala, Swabhava and Jiva. And Yad Adishtanam. Who is the shelter of this universe? Narayana Paraveda, Deva Narayanangaja, Narayana Parayoga, Narayana Paramaka and so on. Whatever you think in this world is worthy of taking shelter, you should understand that Lord Narayana is the shelter of all of that. So the ultimate shelter is Lord Narayana. And then Yatasrishtam, how this universal creation manifests, that was also described by Brahmaji as to how it all starts with the Lord waking up from his yoga nidra and understanding that it's time for creation. And then he glances at Pradhan or Prakriti and impregnates the Prakriti, which is Kala Shakti and Jiva Shakti, and how that agitates the 3 gunas and the whole creation starts, and all that in great detail he describes it in the 5th chapter. And then 3 more questions remain unanswered, which he answers it in the 6th chapter. So the 6th chapter starts with answering the 6th question, the last question, which is Yat Cha. What is this universe composed of? So basically, the answer is that the universe is composed of the Vibhutis of the Supreme Lord. So that's what will be described in this chapter. Now, interestingly, if you see, Srila Prabhupada titles this chapter as Purusha Sukta Confirmed. Very strange, because except for this one purport where one passing reference to Purusha Sukta, there is hardly any mention of Purusha Sukta in the whole chapter by Srila Prabhupada's purport. But Srila Prabhupada titles it as Purusha Sukta Confirmed. But interestingly, the other acharyas explain why Srila Prabhupada titles this chapter as Purusha Sukta Confirmed. Why? What is so special about Purusha Sukta? So actually, traditionally, if you see, when right from the time when Shankaracharya commented upon the Vedic scriptures, he established that Shrutis are far more superior than the Smritis, the Vedas and the Upanishads. And it was for a purpose, because in the Upanishads, the language is so convoluted that it gives an opportunity for multiple interpretations. And therefore, it's very easy to present the philosophy of Mayavad by some twistings and turnings and some word jugglery. It is possible. But the Smritis, the Puranas, Itihasas, they speak in a very straightforward language. It's very, very difficult to twist. It is not spoken in, ambiguous language at all. So what he did is that he presented that the Shrutis are more authentic than the Smritis. So he relegated the Smritis to a secondary, not so important position, which is akin to outright rejecting them in one sense. So subsequently, when the Vaishnava Acharyas came, they had to establish their own philosophy, whether it is Srila Ramanujacharya establishing the Vishishtadvaita or Madhvacharya establishing the Dvaita, or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his followers establishing the Achintya Beda Beda Tattva. Wherever they had to establish the authenticity of their parampara, they had to extensively quote only from the Shruti Shastras. The Mundaka Upanishad, Mandukya Upanishad, Shvetashvatara Upanishad, and they have to quote only from these Upanishads and establish, because those were the Upanishads which were often quoted by Shankaracharya to establish his own Mayavad philosophy. But actually, if you see, in the conclusions which come across through these Shruti Shastras or the Upanishads, they come out in a much more direct, sweet way from the Puranas. So, therefore, if you see traditionally, whether it is Sri Vaishnavas, Madhvaites, or our Gaudiya Vaishnavas, for internal nourishment, for the nourishment of the insiders, there is an almost exclusive acceptance of the Smritis only. If it is Gaudiya Vaishnavas, it is Srimad Bhagavatam primarily, and subsequently Chaitanya Charitamrita and other such literatures. And if you take the Sri Vaishnavites, it is primarily, the Vishnu Puran, Ramayana, and the writings of their own acharyas, the Divya Prabandham, and all those things. In that, for internal nourishment, when Sri Vaishnavas talk with each other, philosophy or scripture, they speak only Smritis. Similarly, the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. But when it comes to establishing, like for example, Baldev Vidyabhushan was challenged. So he had to present the commentary for the Vedanta Sutras, and then an acceptable commentary of Bhagavad Gita. So if you see in those literatures, he would have extensively quoted from the Shrutis, from the Upanishads. But otherwise, if you see the other commentaries, not so much. At the most, they may quote from Gopal Tapani Upanishad, which is not quoted by any other sampradayas, generally. Not that they reject that Upanishad, but it is not considered to be an Upanishad which establishes the superiority of Lord Narayana. Right? So, they don't quote. So, oftentimes, the Vaishnavas had to establish how the Smriti Shastras were on the same footing as the Shruti Shastras. So, for example, Srila Jiva Goswami, when he started compiling the Sandarbhas, in his very first Tattva Sandarbha, he first establishes that how the Shrutis and the Smritis are on the same footing. Then he very slowly establishes how the Smritis are actually better than even Shrutis. And then how of the Smritis, Bhagavatam is the topmost. He establishes that. Right? So, traditionally, the Vaishnavas always had to contend with these, the first Mayavadi presentation that Shrutis are superior. And Smritis always have to do the catching up, with the Shrutis. So, the the Purusha Sukta prayers are one of the most popular prayers from the Rig Veda, which is a Shruti. Okay? And it is often quoted. Interestingly, in the demigod temples also you will see Purusha Sukta chanted. In the Vaishnava temples also you will see it chanted. Because even though Purusha Sukta is a very popular hymn, Purusha Sukta itself does not speak in very explicit language who that Purusha is. Okay. So it is not very clear. At least explicitly it's not so clear. So Bhagavatam, especially the 5th chapter and the 6th chapter of the 2nd canto, they present verses which are exactly the same as Purusha Sukta. In some verses in words also, in some verses in meaning. But Bhagavatam starts with first establishing who that Purusha is. Okay. So, in the 5th chapter, Brahmaji says, after the whole universal form is created and it's floating on the Karanodaka ocean. And then he says, Varshapuga Sahasrante Tadandam Udakeshayam Kala Karma Swabhavasto Jivo Ajivam Ajivayat. He says, after the universal egg was floating in the Karana ocean for 1,000 years, then the Supreme Lord Garbhodaka Sai Vishnu entered that universal egg, filled it with Garbhodaka ocean, lied on it and gave it life. Jivo Ajivam Ajivayat. Till that time when Garbhodaka Sai Vishnu entered that universal egg, that universe was Ajivam. It was not functional. Ajivayat, he gave it life. Then in the next verse he says, Saeva Purushas Tasmad Andam Nirbidya Nirgataha Sahasroru Angri Bahuakshaha Sahasranana Shirshavan. It is mentioned that that very same Purusha, which is Garbhodaka Sai Vishnu, then manifested this form which has 1,000 legs, 1,000 feet, 1,000 arms, 1,000 eyes, 1,000 faces, 1,000 heads, like that. Which Purusha Sukta says, Sahasra Sirsha Purushaha Sahasrakshas Sahasrapat Sabhumim Vishvato Vritva Atyatishtat Dashangulam. That's what Purusha Sukta says. The same thing, even though till the end it does not clarify who that Purusha is, Bhagavatam starts with mentioning who that Purusha is. Saeva Purushaha Tasmad Andam Nirbidya Nirgataha. That very same Purusha, Garbhodaka Sai Vishnu, he pierced through the universe, entered it, laid on the Garbhodaka ocean, and then manifested the universe, which is described to be having 1,000 legs, 1,000 feet, and 1,000 hands, and so on. Right? Like that. So in this way, if you see throughout this 5th chapter and 6th chapter, almost, I think some 11, 12 verses the Acharyas identify are exactly identical to the Purusha Sukta verse. Okay. Like for example, another verse comes, Purushasya Mukam Brahma Kshatram Etasya Bahavaha Urvor Vaishyo Bhagavataha Padbyam Shudro Vyajayata. So this is how the 4 Varnas, they arose from the various parts of the Purusha's body. Similar verses there in Purusha Sukta. Brahmanosya mukam asid bahu rajanyah kritaha uru tadasya yad vaishyah padbyam shudro ajayata. Bhagavatam says padbyam shudro vyajayata. Purusha Sukta says padbyam shudro ajayata. Same meaning. Right? And this very same verse, 12 to 16, we are covering the 16th verse. Says, Sarvam Purushamevedam Bhutam Bhavyam Bhavachayat Tenedam Avritam Vishwam Vitastim Aditishtati. It says. Purusha Sukta says, Sabhumim Vishwato Vritva Atyatishtat Dashangulam. Purusha Evedam Sarvam Yad Bhutam Yacha Bhavyam. Same thing, same meaning. We will not go into the meanings of these verses because that is not the point. But the point is that now that by establishing how the Purusha Sukta is confirmed, and not only that, Bhagavatam further reveals who that Purusha is also. So through the Purusha Sukta prayers, who is glorified? Lord Vishnu. That is very clear. So what is established here is not only are the Shrutis and Smritis on the same footing, but also Bhagavatam or the Smritis reveal details which the Shrutis may not so explicitly mention. So that way, Srila Jiva Goswami establishes that Purana oftentimes may translate to be that which is very ancient or old. But he says, no, that could be one of the meanings, But the meaning of that Purana means that which makes something Purna. That is Purana. So therefore, the Shrutis which may leave some ends loose are actually tied by the Smritis and the Puranas. So they make the whole Vedic gamut Purna. So the Shrutis, Shruti Prasthan, Smriti Prasthan, Nyaya Prasthan, all these are all a part of the same Vedic gamut. So Puranas are those which make this whole series Purna. Okay, like that he establishes. Anyways, so you can go over, there are so many verses. The 18th verse, 19, 20, 21, 28, 29. All these verses actually are exact replica of the Purusha Sukta verses. That's why Srila Prabhupada titles this chapter as Purusha Sukta Confirmed. Okay. But for us who are, we are not so well versed with the Shruti Shastras, so for us, how does it really matter whether Purusha Sukta is confirmed or not, like that we may think. But it's a big deal historically if you see. For what the Vaishnavas had to, contend with the Mayavadis and all that, it's a big deal. So then, currently the section that we are discussing is a description of the universal form. And this is little strange, even though the Bhagavatam is very clear that this universal form is an imaginary form, but there is so much repetition of the universal form again and again and again. There are 3 descriptions of universal form in the second canto alone, spanning over 5 chapters. And second canto has only 10 chapters, which means almost 50% of the chapters talk about the universal form, which Bhagavatam itself very explicitly agrees it's a imaginary form, it's not a real form. In the sense, there is no real Purusha who exists with all the planetary systems as his limbs. That is an imagination. The planetary systems are real. But there is no real person who exists with the universal planets as his body, as his bodily limbs. It is just an allegorical way of telling that just as a person has full control over his body, similarly the Supreme Lord has full control over this universe, because the universe is his body in a sense, but not really, because the Supreme Lord's body is not made of matter. It is made of Chit Shakti, not Bahiranga Shakti or his material energy. So now there are 3 descriptions of this universal form. You may say, why is Bhagavatam being so repetitive? But if you carefully look at it, these 3 descriptions in the second canto have 3 different purposes. For example, the first description of the universal form comes in the first chapter of the second canto, in which Srila Shukadeva Goswami is speaking about 2 types of yogis. One are the regular yogis who have no material desires, they have no material goals, their only goal is liberation. So such yogis meditate on the form of Paramatma within the heart. But there are the second category of yogis who have their primary goal is liberation, but secondarily they also have a desire to enjoy in the material world, check out the various kinds of material enjoyment, and then eventually attain liberation. These type of yogis are called as Krama Muktas, those who get gradual liberation. So for such kind of yogis who do harbor some material goals also, apart from the primary goal of liberation, they are recommended to meditate on the universal form, so that they understand that whatever I am trying to enjoy actually belongs to someone else. So you might want to consider giving up those goals and actually consider liberation as your only goal. That is the purpose. So in order to facilitate their meditation, this universal form is described in the first chapter as an object of meditation of these yogis, which is called as Dharana Ashraya. Dharana Ashraya. The shelter of their meditation is this Virat Rupa. So the first description, he says, Andakosha Shariresmin Saptavarana Samyute Vairaja Purusho Yoso Bhagavan Dharanashrayaha. Vairaja Purusha, this Virat Purusha, is said to be the Dharanashraya, the object of meditation of these yogis. Okay. And then this description is like Patala are the soles of his feet, the Rasatala are his heels, the Mahatala are his ankles, Talatala are his calves, and so on. You know, this kind of description comes so that a person can meditate, the yogi can meditate on this form. Even though this is an imaginary form, but still there is a bona fide way in which he can imagine this form. He should not be imagining anything else. So for that purpose, to facilitate his imagination, there is this first description which comes in the first chapter of the second canto. Then what we are reading now is the second description. I will come to that little later. Then the third description comes in the 10th chapter of the second canto, the last chapter. Okay. In that description, if you see, the purpose of the description is how in this material world desires shape our gross body and subtle body. That is the message that is being communicated through the third description of the universal form. So therefore, if you see, this third description of the universal form is very interesting. So the description is like this. He says, and then the universal form desired to eat. The Virat Purusha desired to eat. Then what happened? Then the mouth manifested in the Virat Rupa. Then what happened? Then the gross tongue, Talu, manifested. Then the subtle tongue, Jihva, which is used for tasting, the ability to taste, that manifested. Then what happened? Then Varuna manifested. Varuna is the sense devata who assists the sense of taste. He manifested. Then what happened? Then the sense object, taste, rasa, manifested. Like that. So first comes his desire. From the desire, then the gross body, then subtle body, then the sense devatas, everything manifests. Then the universal form desired to see. Then what happened? Then his gross eyes, Chakshu, sorry, not Chakshu, Akshini manifested. Then his subtle eyes, Chakshu, manifested. Then Surya Dev, the sense devata for aiding vision, he manifested. Then the sense object, form, manifested. So basically, this description goes like this. But actually, what does it mean that the universal form desired? There is no such form. The universal form desired means it is an symbolic way of telling that every jiva gets his gross body and subtle body according to his desires. The desires shape the gross and subtle body, just like in the universal forms, gross and subtle body means the desire of the conglomerate of all the jivas of that particular universe. They don't have a single desire, but they all have individual desires based on which the various gross elements, subtle elements, and everything manifests. Okay. So in order to communicate this, actually the third description of the universal form is there. Okay. So then the second description of the universal form is what we are discussing right now. This has a totally different purpose. Even though the description may look somewhat similar, but if you carefully look at it, it is different. It is describing the same universal form, but the purpose is different. So in this description, if you see, the description is like from Garbhodaka Sai Vishnu's gross tongue, manifested um, manifested Varuna in the universal form, and Jihva in the universal form. How from the gross body of Garbhodak Sai Vishnu, and the subtle body of the Garbhodak Sai Vishnu, practically everything in this universe manifested from that. Okay. So now one may wonder, gross body, subtle body, how can Garbhodak Sai Vishnu have gross body or subtle body? Because he's supposed to have a spiritual body, right? Yes, but spiritual body or spiritual elements also have variety in terms of gross, subtle, and everything. Just that gross also is spiritual, subtle also is spiritual. In the material world, gross is material, subtle is also material. So, therefore, that kind of a description comes, how practically every part of the Virat Rupa manifests is actually the ingredients of that Virat Rupa is actually coming from Garbhodak Sai Vishnu. So, so now someone may say that, see, one thing I have heard, the ultimate cause is the Supreme Lord. But what we have heard is that the material cause of this universe is Prakriti, matter. And the effective cause is actually time, Kala. Right? So, but now here, what are you suggesting here? Right? So, there is material cause and effective cause, right? So, material cause means when you are trying to make a pot. Okay, the pot is made. The potter, the clay is the material cause. Okay, clay transforms into pot. But clay in itself will not transform into pot. You need a potter who has to shape that clay, bake it, and do all such things. So, the potter is called the effective cause or nimitta karan. Then there is the potter's wheel, the stick, which is used to rotate the pot, that is called as instrumental cause, sahakari karan. Okay. So, in this material world, the material cause is said to be matter, pradhan. The effective cause is said to be time, kala. But Bhagavatam says, yes, but that is only on a superficial level. Ultimately, the material cause of this universe is also the Supreme Lord only. And the effective cause is also the Supreme Lord only. How? Because Pradhan is his energy only. Right? So Pradhan is his energy only. So therefore, it is like telling, what is the source of reflection that you see on a mirror? Someone may say mirror. Someone may say the person standing in front of mirror. Right? So the Lord is that person who is standing in front of the mirror. Mirror is Maya Devi. Just that this matter or Maya is a highly convex or concave mirror. So when you look at the reflection in a highly convex or concave mirror, the reflection is highly distorted. It's not exactly representing the original person who is standing in front of the mirror. So similarly, when the spiritual bodily parts of the Supreme Lord manifest through the agent of Maya, they become the vitiated transformation, or as Srila Prabhupada calls, perverted reflection. That is matter. But the source of that matter is the Supreme Lord only. So that is Vibhutis. The material Vibhutis are just perverted reflection, just what you see on a highly concave or a convex mirror. The source of that reflection is the person standing, but the reflection doesn't look anywhere close to the person who is standing. So similarly, It is all the bodily parts of the Supreme Lord. He is the material cause also of this universe. But when it comes through the agency of Maya, that perverted reflection looks very different. The Lord's bodily parts are Satchit Ananda, whereas the material Vibhutis are not. They are temporary, perishable, not so supremely attractive, right? So, therefore, it is mentioned that even though speech and fire, etc., arise from the material energy, they are said to arise from the bodily parts of Garbhodaka Sai Vishnu. Why? Because they are vibhutis of the Lord's various limbs, such as mouth. They are vibhutis. Vibhutis means perverted reflections. Okay. And because Maya is the Shakti of the Supreme Lord, and because Shakti Shaktimatayor Abhedat, because of the non-difference between the Shakti and the Shaktiman Purusha, therefore it is not wrong to say that the cause of the material cause of this universe is Prakriti. Is that wrong? No. The material cause of this universe is the Supreme Lord. Is that wrong? No. Just that we need to know in what sense. In what sense it is correct. So, therefore, there is primary attribution and secondary attribution. Like, for example, let's say Radha Gopinath temple has 3 cars. Okay. Innova 1, Innova 2, Innova 3. Let's say. Okay. And 3 drivers have been assigned the 3 cars, responsibility for the 3 cars. Okay. Let's say driver 1, driver 2, driver 3. So, you may say that, Prabhuji, I need to go to the airport. Okay. You can take the car. Which car? You may say, Daruk Prabhu ka gadi. Daruk Prabhu's car. Is it wrong? No. Because he is responsible for it. But ultimately, is it Daruk Prabhu's car? No. It is Radha Gopinath's car. Right? So, as long as we understand in what context it is mentioned, so therefore, is the Supreme Lord the material cause of this universe? Yes. Is material energy Pradhan the material cause of this universe? Yes. Just that we have to know in what sense. That's all. And also, ultimately, these material elements, earth, water, fire, air, ether, and their expansions, in the spiritual world, they are all eternal and spiritual. Like in one of the previous classes I was mentioning, their names are also mentioned in the Shastras. The spiritual ether, which causes spiritual sound, is called as Parameshti. That which is called as Kham is Parameshti. Air, which is called as Vayu, in the spiritual world, it's called as Puman. Fire, Agni, its spiritual counterpart is called as Vishwa. Water is called as Nivritti. And earth is called as Sarva. In the spiritual world, these are the spiritual, they manifest elements like earth, water, fire, air, ether, but they are not like of this material world. The material earth, water, fire, air, ether are the vitiated transformations of these spiritual elements, right? So they are called as vibhutis. Okay. And actually, after this description, you will see a few verses down the line, Brahmaji himself shares a very interesting experience. Brahmaji says to Narada Muni that you know what, one time when I got up from my sleep, I understood that I had to perform some yajna to please the Supreme Lord and start the creation. But when I tried to find the ingredients of that yajna, I could not find any of the ingredients. all I could find was the bodily parts of Garbhodaka Sai Vishnu. His legs, his hands, his feet, his eyes, his ears. So what did I do? I collected all the ingredients from his bodily parts and performed that yajna. Like that it is mentioned. So now what is it that he is actually describing? What does it mean when he says that I could not see any ingredients? I could see only the bodily parts. What it means is that he could actually see that how the Supreme Lord is the source of everything in this material world. As the second verse of Chatushloki Bhagavatam says, Rite artam yat pratiyeta na pratiyeta chatmani tad vidyad atmano mayam yata baso yata tamaha. Illusion means inability to see the connection of a particular object with the Supreme Lord. That is illusion. So Brahmaji was granted the vision which was beyond illusion, that he could literally see that how everything, every single manifestation of the Supreme Lord has its source in the Supreme Lord. So basically, it is not that even we are doing the same thing. In one sense, practically what Brahmaji saw that time, we are also seeing the same thing. That there is Purusha Avayavan Rite. He says, Yada asya nabhyad nalinad aham asam mahatmanah navidam yagya sambharan Purusha Avayavan Rite. I could not see anything else other than the limbs of the Supreme Lord, which means the limbs of the Supreme Lord are the source of everything in this material world. Even now. But we don't have that vision to see, but we are allowed to see through the vision of the Shastras. The Shastras are presenting here. Even though we are not able to see, even Pradhan we cannot see in one sense. It is subtle. So you might ascribe it to Pradhan or ultimately ascribe it to the Supreme Lord. If you are willing to see through the vision of the scriptures, we do understand ultimately even the material cause of this universal manifestation is the Supreme Lord. So these manifestations are called Vibhutis. So now, why do we have to understand these material Vibhutis? Is it necessary? We will see from Bhagavad Gita. Yesterday also, Purushottam Prabhu was sharing from this 10th chapter, which is called as Vibhuti Yoga. Opulences of the Absolute. So Krishna starts this chapter. Interestingly, if you see, the 10th chapter comes immediately after Krishna says, Manmana Bhava Madbhakto Madhyaji Mam Namaskuru, as after very firmly establishing pure devotional service. Ananyas Chintayanto Mam Yajana Paryupasate Apichet Suduracharo Bhajate Mam Ananyabhak Shipram Bhavati Dharmatma, and so on. So after establishing all these things, suddenly he starts talking about the Vibhutis. Why? Why is it relevant for a devotee even to learn or understand these Vibhutis? So Krishna starts this chapter by telling, Bhuya eva mahabaho shrunume paramam vachaha yatteham priyamanaya vakshami hitakamyaya. Please hear again, my dear Arjuna, I am going to speak this very confidential subject matter to you because you are filled with prema and you will be happy to hear this. And what is he going to hear? Yeah, he is going to hear about bhakti. He is also going to hear about the vibhuti of the Supreme Lord, the power of the Supreme Lord. Now why? Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti writes, by knowing the powers of the Lord, one understands that the Lord is worthy of worship. So to have that appreciation of the Supreme Lord, at least whatever is the manifest material universe, because we can't see the non-manifest spiritual world which is not manifest to our eyes, but at least the manifest material world we can see how everything that we see in this manifest material world is controlled by the Supreme Lord, how everything is a manifestation of his vibhuti. When we understand, naturally develops a sense of respect. Okay. So, and then he says, now the Lord will explain the powers in detail. For what purpose? For the pleasure of those who have devotion. So which means those who have devotion, when they hear about these vibhutis, it should give them pleasure. That is the purpose. Later Krishna says, Etam vibhutim yogam cha mamayo vetti tatvatah saha avikalpena yogena yujyate na atra samshayah. He says that one who hears about this bhakti yoga and also hears about these vibhutis, the power of the Supreme Lord, saha avikalpena yogena yujyate na atra samshayah. That person will engage in undeviated devotional service. Of this there is no doubt, he says. Which means the purpose of these presentations is just to invoke devotion. There is no other cause. Right? So, and then Krishna starts describing his vibhuti in a very summarized way. Aham sarvasya prabhavo mattas sarvam pravartate iti madva bhajante maam buddha bhava samanvita. He says, in essence, what is my power? Aham sarvasya prabhavaha. Whatever you see in this universe, I am the source of everything. Mattaha sarvam pravartate. I am not just the source, but I am the very operating principle as Paramatma. Iti matva buddhaha. That intelligent person who understands this, bhava samanvita mam bhajante. He worships me with great devotion, with great love. So the purpose of describing Krishna to be the source and the maintainer of this material universe, what is the purpose? Avikalpena yogena yujyate. Bhava samanvita mam bhajante. The purpose is that. Right? So, after briefly mentioning this, Arjuna says, Vaktum arhasya sheshena divyahi atma vibhutayah yabir vibhutibir lokan imams tvam vyapya tishtasi. He says that, my dear Krishna, you have very briefly mentioned this vibhuti. I want to know about it in detail. Now, why? Why you want to know it in detail? Because attention to details is a sign of love. It is but natural that someone who has love wants to know things about his object of love in detail. Right? So whenever, for example, my sister calls my mother, let's say my mother went for a yatra. So my sister calls my mother and she asks, oh, I went for this yatra, I went to this place, this place. My sister says, no. Just tell me, right from the time you left from home, what all did you do? Okay, you took a cab, you took the station. Okay, we traveled in the train and reached that. No. Tell me who all traveled with you. So what did you carry for prasadam? So all these details, why? Because all those details are in connection with her object of love, the mother. She will not be satisfied with any details being compromised because those details are in connection with the object of her love. Similarly, Arjuna says, no, you have summarized it. I am not here to hear your summary. I want in detail. Vistarena. In detail, you please speak. You should speak about them fully. Okay. So, at least speak about those vibhutis which I can see. Imam tvam vyapya tishtasi. Please speak about those vibhutis through which you, manifest in this material world. So, and then he says, Bhuyah kataya triptirhi shrinvato nasti me mritam. I will never be satisfied hearing about your vibhutis. So, make it as elaborate as possible. Okay, like that he speaks. Okay. And then Krishna starts speaking about his various kinds of vibhutis. And the very first vibhuti that he mentions is super soul. Aham atma gudakesha. Sarva bhutashaya stitaha. Aham adischa madhyam cha bhutanam anta evacha. I am the super soul present in every living entity, controlling every living entity, and so on, like that. And then starting from that, he speaks about various different vibhutis of the Supreme Lord. And he says that because all these vibhutis are material manifestations, they are all Shakti, they all arise from the energy of the Supreme Lord, Therefore, they are worthy of meditation. Even though some are preferable to others. Okay. Krishna says in the 7th chapter, Rasoham apsu kaunteya, prabhasmi sasishuryayoho, pranavah sarva vedeshu, shabdakke paurusham drishu. I am the taste of water. You drink water, you remember Krishna. So water is a fit object of meditation. The light of the sun and moon are fit objects of meditation. But the deity form is a more important object of meditation because, as he says here, all are to be considered as worthy of meditation as forms of the Lord, even though some are preferable to others. Why? Because some of those forms more completely represent Krishna, and some only less completely represent Krishna. Those manifestations of his material energy less completely represent Krishna, and those manifestations of the spiritual energy more completely represent Krishna. Therefore, when you meditate, therefore those forms which more completely represent Krishna are fitter objects of meditation than those which less completely represent Krishna. Okay. And that meditation is Anukulyana Krishna Anushilanam. Right? And he presents in the rest of the chapter, he presents that of all the horses I am Uchchai Shrava, which means Uchchai Shrava is his Vibhuti. Now, all the horses, are they Vibhutis of Krishna or not? They are also Vibhutis of Krishna. Then why he says of all the horses I am Uchchai Shrava? Why? Because anything extraordinary in a category, we tend to approach it with a great sense of respect and adoration. And that is the way in which we are supposed to approach Krishna. Anukulyena Krishnanushilanam. Right? So therefore, it's not that the other horses are not Krishna's Vibhutis, but the best amongst them you approach with that much more respect. So therefore, he remains the best, remains Arjuna the best. Of all the elephants, I am Airavata. Of all the luminaries, I am the moon. Because there is a greater adoration, there is a greater respect when you approach the moon in compared to the other luminaries. Not that the other luminaries are not his Vibhutis, they are also his Vibhutis. But a moon is a more complete representation of Krishna. Therefore, like that. Anyways, so I will just end with this. Actually, after speaking this whole chapter, Brahmaji says that Yata harau bhagavati nrinam bhaktir bhavishyati sarvatmani akiladare iti sankalpya varnaya. So before this he says, Idam bhagavatam nama puranam brahma sammitam. Idam bhagavatam nama yanme bhagavatoditam sangrahoyam vibhutinam tvametad vipuli kuru. He says, what I have spoken to you till now is Bhagavatam, which was spoken to me by the Supreme Lord. It is a compilation of the Vibhutis of the Supreme Lord. Tvametad vipuli kuru. Now you spread it. And how you should spread? Yata harau bhagavati nrinam bhaktir bhavishyati sarvatmani akiladare iti sankalpya varnaya. You should spread this message in such a way that it invokes devotion in the heart. So the purpose of all these descriptions, any description of Bhagavatam is meant to inspire devotion. It is not devoid. Not even a syllable of Bhagavatam is devoid of this purpose. Dashamasya vishuddhyartam navanam iha lakshanam varnayante mahatmanaha shrutena archena cha anjasa. The purpose of the description of all the 9 topics of Srimad Bhagavatam is to inspire attraction towards the 10th topic of Krishna. How it inspires, we cannot know at our immature state of devotion. But the speaker of Bhagavatam knows. Just like the doctor knows how this medicine is going to function on the patient. Even though the patient may think, I am putting the tablet in my mouth. How is it going to cure my headache, which is happening here? But the doctor knows how the medicine functions. So therefore, we should have trust that not a single syllable of Bhagavatam is actually devoid of this purpose of ultimately helping us develop our attraction towards Krishna. So therefore, these vibhutis also have to be approached with due diligence, with proper mood of appreciation. As Prabhupada says, there are other explanations by Srila Prabhupada, but we don't have time. We have already crossed time, so I will pause here. Thank you all very much for your patient listening and your enthusiastic participation. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Hare Krishna.